good to be speaking to you.
Yeah, it's nice to be face to face, even
That's
if
right.
it's virtual. Yeah.
That's right. As you know, you've been on the shortlist for this since it started. So I'm glad to have you
Thank
on.
you. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be
Good.
to you. That's always nicer.
Good, good. So are you happy to just get started?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay. I'm Monica Kochar. I live in New Delhi, India, and I have been into maths, I think, pretty much since I opened my eyes, because my father was an engineer. He passed away long back, and he was always studying, always wanting to go further in his. He worked for the government,
Okay.
and so maths was a natural choice. And I went into mathematics as a graduate, postgraduate. I taught. So, in a nutshell, over the years, I have taught children of all types. I have authored books. I have helped edtech companies design their curriculum. I have reviewed books. So, my passion continues to be, bringing kids to maths and then taking maths to the kids. That's how somebody
Brilliant. Okay.
described it. Most
Brilliant.
non-jargon. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So quite a lot of variety there, teaching and also instructional design, curriculum design.
Yeah.
Which aspects of that do you enjoy the most? The teaching in the
I
classroom
think
or the writing
I,
side of things?
I think I forgot to add, I've also done a lot of teacher training.
Oh yeah.
So
Okay.
it's hard to decide. It's like a balance. So I thoroughly enjoy designing, but I also enjoy face to face. So one without the other is kind of incomplete. So if
Yeah.
I
Sure.
do design, I would also want to go somewhere, go for a training or something and implement it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always feel as well, I now do more training than teaching. And I actually, at this point, I actually prefer the training side. If I had to choose one, but I can't, the same as you, I can't bring myself to just step away from teaching, because every time something comes up in the training, I'm keen to go and try it in the classroom. And likewise, or I should say conversely, I wouldn't feel right training teachers if I didn't still have that current connection to the classroom.
I get it.
I think I've had trainers before who stopped teaching like 10 years ago, and now they just train, and a lot of their practice is it's sort of 10 years old,
Yeah, that's true. I think you're very lucky that you get to teach, train, design, everything. So
yeah, although I don't do the
yeah.
design as much as you do. What's the latest thing you've been working on the design side?
So I have a bunch of books by a publisher. In fact, it's for the Indonesian market. So they want to upgrade their books, which were initially written for the Indian market for international schools in Indonesia. So this is a very exciting project. So I first changed their books. Now I'm doing their teacher manuals. And it's very exciting because I'm able to bring all those fun ideas, the child-friendly ideas, which I really like, into it. And they are giving a lot of freedom, and they are very teacher centric. So they are not interested in jargon filled ideas, or they are very, very sensitive to the fact that how much can a teacher do in a classroom, just put much in the teacher manual. So this is quite an exciting project. I am also involved in the webinars, which are face-to-face sessions, and something or the other keeps coming up on that side. But my main work right now is with the publisher.
Oh, that's really interesting about the Indonesian project. So I'm teaching in Indonesia. Obviously, that's my
I know
my region. So that's really exciting, and it's great to see. Well, it's great to know the source of some of these books, because some of the books that have been used here, not just in maths, but across the board, and in language, especially where I focus, some of the books that are used here. The dreadful, quite frankly. So it's good to know that they're being refreshed, and it's good to know who's doing some of it. That's great. Okay, exciting stuff.
Thank you.
So yeah, obviously, I first connected with you on LinkedIn quite some time ago, and it was your particular approach to maths and the particular kind of profile around maths that you have that that attracted me to you. And as I think you know, one of the main things that I'm interested in doing both when I teach and when I train and when I when I design programs for schools, the main thing I'm interested in is applied learning. So trying to bring context and application into whatever we're learning. And this for me was something that was growing out of my background in language teaching. So I think perhaps if there is a spectrum, then language teaching is perhaps at one end of that spectrum where it's very, very applied and it's very easy to bring context into it. And as I started to work with teachers from other subjects, my goal was always the same. Whatever subject you teach, you should be able to bring context, you should be able to bring application into your subject.
Absolutely.
And I worked with, I started off working with English teachers, and then that grew to kind of the other humanities areas, and it grew until eventually I was working with whole faculties in schools, which then included, for example, the maths teachers. And that's where I hit the wall, because my background in maths was not very strong. And I still believed very, very strongly in the core of my heart, my being, that maths could be taught this way too. It could be applied, it could be contextualized just the same as every other subject, but I was not the one who could do it. And I kept coming against these challenges of, well, how do you contextualize this seemingly very abstract thing? And so that's when I got in touch with you actually a while back and said, Monica, help me. So what are your thoughts about this? Obviously you kind of, I think, agree with me on this, the importance of application and context. So what do you think about that in the context of maths? What are your thoughts about it?
Both the areas that just talked about, language and context, two nerve centers that you've hit. And both of these are absolutely 100% required in maths, because every time maths has been abstracted, and most of the maths that we are learning, especially geometry, has come from the Greeks, who abstracted mathematics and turned it into a body of. They did that because they found it as a brilliant system of reasoning and analysis. But for a school kid, it's too much. A school kid, while doing convert mixed fractions to improper fractions, or find the third angle of, wondering, why am I learning this? And therefore, that context is sensible. That context is what asks kids to maths. And there are so many, you bring real life into the maths class. You bring a bit of history, why this topic was actually done. Maybe history of exams. And when nothing works, if a kid says, I'm not interested, I'm not going to do maths further, still why do I have to learn? Then I also bring in a bit of brain development, that when you do history, a lot of your logical skills are built. When you do algebra, your pattern reading skills are built. So they need to have the answer to their question, why am I learning this? If that question is snubbed, which most of at least my teachers snubbed it for me, and I believe even presently a lot of teachers don't know the answer to that.
No,
so they
exactly right.
That's what kills maths.
Yes, and every other subject, I think.
Yeah. And language, like you rightly said, is the foundation to things. So if language needs to be integrated in maths, and more than that, the methods of learning language need to come in maths.
I agree.
There needs to be a stress on vocabulary maths and understanding vocabulary, and there needs to be a stress on writing a math essay or a math paragraph on whatever I learned. And what I discovered, in fact, this was about 2 years ago, when I was with a very brilliant curriculum designer, books that she was designing. I learned that what she told me was that most of the students who do not like maths are linguists. Actually, they're good in language. So therefore, if you bring the maths class, most of the maths phobia is gone. And the books that she designed, finally, they went into the market. And the feedback that came from schools was that when learning from these books, their fear of maths is going. So she had a point there. And I realized that she does have a point, that somebody like you, suppose
I'm a candidate for that.
You maths this way, that write a story or write a poem, whatever you have learned today, have a page letter to your grandmother or somebody about what you have learned,
Yeah.
probably your brain would grasp the
I'm sure
concepts
you're right.
faster.
Yeah. I mean, even when I'm working with teachers, again, whether it's in maths or in other subjects, when a teacher is struggling to get what I mean by context, when I'm talking about context and application, and they're struggling, because for some teachers, and in your training, you must have seen this as well, some teachers are, the idea of context is so alien. They don't even know what we're talking about. And when I've got a teacher who's really struggling to kind of pin that down, I refer to stories, and I say, well, what's the story of what you're teaching? And that's the bit in maths that I found when I can't find the application for maths because I don't have the background, the thing that I can fall upon is, okay, well, if nothing else, let's find the story that we can tell to the kids that makes this interesting. And there are so many things. You talked about the Greek history there of kind of the abstraction of maths, which I think is really interesting. Sometimes, maths teachers will say to me, no, there really is no application for this. This really is just an academic pursuit. And I said, well, at the very least, can't we think of who was the person where, some 100 years ago, who was the guy that, and it usually is a man, who was that man who woke up and said, what happens when I do this with this number? And there's got to be some narrative, some story, something that you can kind of share. And that, I think you're right about that, because it seems that approach comes naturally to me, where the more mathematical approach is lost on me most times.
Yeah. You're not the first.
Sure. No, I don't think it's any accident or any coincidence that maths seems to be amongst the most hated subjects in school. And I think that's sad, but it seems to be quite true. And I think you're right. There's too much abstraction in maths. And I wonder what you think as well, all of that abstraction, all of that, the bit where once upon a time, the Greek culture decided maths was interesting and fun, and they did these abstract things with it. I wonder, I feel if you approach maths that way with kids for the first time, it will turn them on. But if you can get them engaged in maths to begin with, then they will find that enjoyment in it as well. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, that's how a lot of fantastic teachers do. For example, a bunch of teachers I was observing, they gave kids, let's say, a stack of newspapers and asked them that you have to build a bridge using 2 sticks in a way that stick, I should be able to put a 1 kg of weights on it. And figure out how do you do it. So this is how maths developed. So let's say the Egyptians were using maths, and the Greeks knew what they were doing, and they abstracted the principles. So if you put students in the Egyptians and you say, okay, do the math, and do the math not as a principle, without knowing the principle, figure out how to do this. So a lot of projects are built like that. The other way, if projects are not possible, is like I did with grade 11, and at the end of the year they told me that was the most memorable chapter for them, with SL students 20. So instead of going straight into, if you have a question type, use this method, this type, use this method, which teachers are used to, I threw a problem at them. And I said, you know what probability is? How would you solve this? So the entire class got into group, tried, and they got to know. Higher and a higher and a higher challenge. And the final challenge, it took them about 1 hour to crack one problem. And then I asked them, don't you think it would be nice if there were some tools using which we could solve these? And they said, so I said, okay, so maths, I do a little bit drama. This is where maths has come to the rescue of humanity. Maths people have these few tools. Would you like to learn? I said, of course, no, we don't want to spend 45 minutes to do a problem. So I will teach them just the tools. You can use a Venn diagram, you can use a chart here. Here is something called as. And now I would ask them, now can you do a match the following and see which tool is good for which problem? And they were so enthusiastic. And they were able to figure it out because they were working in group. And my condition was that everybody in the group has to understand, because I can come and do a viva with any one of you. So the brighter ones, they have to ensure that the weaker ones also
That's nice. I like that. Yeah.
It's like climbing a mountain, all of you are tied
Yeah.
with. So they got it, and I was shocked because a chapter for which, let's say, in the yearly plan we had about 10 to 12 days, finished in 6 to 7 days, because the kids
Wow.
were so energized. And I felt, yeah, there is something about this, about the kids straight away,
Hmm.
but let them see the context behind the rules. So this is where the
Yeah.
context was that take can be solved in multiple ways, but the most efficient and the most economic way is the one which a maths brain would have figured it out. It came out with
Yeah.
a little
Right.
bit of an awe for the maths people. So it was, maths is useless, but it was
Yeah.
maths people. They do have some job to do.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, there's so many things that you've used the word tools a few times there. It's interesting as well. That's another parallel with language, I think, because I often use that
Yeah,
word when I'm
yeah,
talking about language as a tool for communication. Um,
yeah.
and you talked about tools a lot. There are so many things that even in my, I talk about a lot. I talk about maths, how most of the things that I learned in maths in school, I've not really used since. And that is true. But
Hmm.
there are also a lot of things that would be more in my grasp today if I had a better understanding of some mathematical principles,
True.
and not particularly advanced principles, just things that I
Yeah.
either didn't pay much attention to at school, or they weren't presented in that contextual way. Where if a teacher had said to me, hey, when you're 25, 30, 35, you're going to have this, you're going to need to fix something in your apartment, or you're going to need to, work this thing out, and here's the tool for doing that.
Yeah.
I'm quite certain I would have remembered these things so much better than I have. So tools is definitely, I think, the right word for the job.
I would differ here because this doesn't work with kids. If you say when you're
Right.
30, 35, you will need it,
Sure.
they sometimes they would say, I learned it at that time. So
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's valid. That's fair.
kids need a context that makes sense right then
Yeah.
and there.
Yeah. No,
So
I agree with that.
for a lot of concepts, a question could simply be asked to them: who knows this topic? Or whose life would be affected if this topic was not there? So let's say we were doing fractions and mixed fractions, and I just asked who, and came up with a lot of examples. Let's say that a designer or a tailor, all these people know what mixed fractions are, and because they deal with it in the day-to-day life. So similarly, for any topic, even be differential calculus, it could be right, could be quadratic equations, and you just ask them who needs it. Now, if they don't have an immediate answer, then let's search for it, because
Yeah.
the bottom line is there is nothing which has been created in this universe which is useless.
Right. Yeah, that's
So
right.
there's bound to be some use for it. Like I said, end of the day, if nothing else works, I tell the kids that we need in order to live, and different subjects help different parts of the brain
Sure.
develop, and maths
Sure.
is a to chisel out something in your head.
Yeah.
That I found used to satisfy even the worst of the skeptics were
Yeah. Yeah. No,
satisfied
that
that,
sounds good. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, the maths
And
is a
I,
tool to develop your own brain. I
yeah,
would
no,
say
that's
that.
true. That's very good. And I agree
Hmm.
completely about, you said nothing is useless. One thing I
Yeah.
often say to what teachers when I'm trying to, again, encourage this use of application, I'll tell teachers,
Hmm.
if you're teaching something, that question that you raised earlier, when the student says to you, why are we
Hmm.
learning this? And
Hmm.
often, far, far too often, teachers don't have not just a good answer, they don't have any
Yeah.
answer.
They
They
don't
just
have
have,
any
there's no
answer.
answer for that, right?
Right.
As I
Clue.
tell teachers, if you don't know the answer to that,
Hmm.
then what you're teaching has no use. And if you're teaching something that's useless, why are you teaching it? But the secret
Hmm.
is nothing is useless. If you look hard
So,
enough, if you think
yeah.
enough, you will find the use. What somebody
I
somewhere has a
those
use for
teachers,
this.
I call those teachers math murderers. So I ask them in my sessions, are you a creator or a murderer? And I
Okay.
tell them the difference. So it actually has given very positive results. They suddenly stop in the tracks. I said, are you creating maths in the of the kids, or are you murdering it? But I do it in a very, very empathic way. empathy is the on which to work. So I say it's not really your fault or my fault if we are murdering maths. It's how we were taught, because our teacher was taught. So
Yeah.
probably when I was in school, if you asked a question, you were just because the teacher was taught.
Yeah.
And then teachers, okay, nobody ever taught you why 2 into 1 by 3 is 1 by 6. Why is fraction division the way it is? Can you find it today? Now that questions answer can be found on Google.
Uh-huh.
So can you go out today? So that kind of gives them, because if I straight away say you're murdering maths, you know very well the teachers will just shut down. But it's
Of
like,
course, yeah.
okay, nobody taught you, but now can we go ahead and learn, and then kind of open up and we do something. But it is difficult. It is
Yeah.
difficult to
No, that's
said.
right.
It's sometimes you are up.
No, that's right. There's something there, again, that links up with one of the perspectives I often use. You talked about how teachers often learn from their own teachers, right? So if you're teaching something in a particular way, it stands to reason that your teachers taught that way as well. And
Very true.
I often think that teaching as a profession, there's something kind of unique about teaching, because not many other professions do you learn how to be that thing, how to be the practitioner by being the patient. So if you want to
Yeah.
become a doctor, you go to doctor's school and learn from the best in the world how to be a doctor. You don't learn how to become a doctor by being a patient for
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
years, you know. So most teachers really, although they do go to college and they do get training, the
Yeah.
foundation of their practice comes from their teachers. And so there's this cycle. So for you, who obviously approaches teaching maths in a very different way from the traditional approach, what was the birth of that in you? You've already talked about your dad. Was it your dad that kind of brought this to you, or how do you have a different
Really,
perspective?
because he was doing very traditional maths. I think that's a very deep perception you have, that the key thing about teaching is that you're learning to teach as you're, so it's like you're learning to swim into water. So
Yeah,
that's
right.
the difficult part of teaching as a profession. I think for me it was the BH, the Bachelor of Education college that I entered. That's
Okay.
the premier college in India, in the University of, it's called Central Institute of Education, or CIE as we call it here. I think for me, and they take only 25 kids a year at the time. This was way back in early 90s. They used to take only 25 kids in one batch.
Okay.
And for a lot of us who are alumni from that college, CIE created us. So it's the professors there. It's the passion with which they work. It's the way they would go into life, to philosophy of to tools to teach and admin. So the entire passion that they had was transferred to us. So by the time,
Right.
and CIE, what they do is it's a 10-month course, and in the second week, you classrooms, go teach. So
Okay.
you are
Very
doing
quick.
3 days a week, and two
Wow.
days
Yeah.
you are assigned a school. You have to go inside, and your supervisor, they're observing you while you're trying to teach. So the professor that I had, Professor Krishna Kumar, he's a very, very respected name in India. He was our supervisor. So I would say he was the second person I would say, who I still remember after my first trial class, end of which I thought, I'm no good. I should not even be into this course. Yeah, and I saw his notes in my lesson plan notebook, and he had written, the was, "You are a born teacher." And I
Wow.
was like, wow, what is this? So for me, it was when I entered the first classroom that I felt this is my calling. This is what I
That's great.
want to do. And I was child centric right from the word go.
Right.
And it was a trainee, which I trained maths and chemistry, and I majored in maths. And I remember a student had asked me some question about chemistry, and I didn't know the answer. And I actually went back to my professor, who connected chemistry professor in the university, and I went to her. So I was, it just became very natural. And because I was very young, the kids were more like friends, and they used to ask questions very freely, and I
Mm-hmm.
would go and look for answers.
Yeah.
And that whole process brought this me. Even I remember I had to teach square root, and square root symbol is like this. And I started thinking, it's a symbol this way. There has to be. And I actually went into history, and I came to know it came from the symbol small r, and r during the turned into a symbol like this. So it was a lot of fun
Wow.
for me.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
used to,
Yeah.
so I used to do an exercise that what can a kid ask this chapter, and I used to think, no, I need to ask with the answer to that. And the
Wow.
more
Yeah.
I did, the more fun teaching became, and the rapport with the kids developed. So it was like one thing feeding into the other. That's what led me to teach in a different way. So my colleagues used to say, "Why are you wasting so much time?" And I said, "I need to know. I need to know why
Yeah.
this thing is."
Yeah.
And the school I started teaching in had another school on the same campus, Mirambika. Miram teachers who had all the answers. Also was surrounded by teachers in my school around, which had the answers. So that also kind of added to it. But by and large, it was that if a kid asks me a question, I need to have the answer. If I don't
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
the answer, I used to say to them, okay, give me and I'll get it for you.
Yeah.
And I taught for about 20 years, and I ever did not go back because kids, they remember. She said 48 hours. So
That's
if
right.
you're not there by 47 and 9 minutes, they'll come searching for you.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
right. Yeah.
went back, and then over the years, I started thinking, let me figure out myself, question can they ask, and I will get get an
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I mean, it must help that you are interested yourself in finding those answers.
Yeah,
Obviously, you became a maths teacher and I became a language teacher. I think it's no surprise that those are the subjects that we are particularly interested in. I
yeah.
didn't really enjoy much of school. I didn't. There weren't many subjects I particularly enjoyed. I wasn't very good at most subjects in
Mm-hmm.
school, but language was the standout subject for me. And not only was
Mm-hmm.
I good at it, but I really enjoyed it. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
teach it now, like
Mm-hmm.
you, it's something that I enjoy learning about. And every time a student asks me a question that I can't answer, I'm excited to find out
Mm-hmm.
the answer with them. Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah. It also
Um,
helped the community. I worked in some very progressive schools, so
right.
community was also very helpful in that
Yeah,
way.
good.
Teachers, if they are in the right community, that makes a lot of difference.
No, that's good.
So
I was going
that
to ask you
was
that question. So tell us a bit more about that. Some of the schools that you've worked in where this has been embraced, and if you've had any schools where perhaps it's not been quite so well embraced.
okay. So my first school was where it was not very well embraced. It was a CBSE school in New Delhi, a conventional exam-oriented school. So while the school has a very empathic ethos for the kids, sheer size and the number with about 2,000 kids, and a very traditional structure rooted into it, they haven't really embraced it fully. But they gave other teachers the full freedom to figure out for herself how to do it. So
Right.
I switched to alternate education because I could not handle the sheer of maths that traditional education attracted.
Right.
And India, at least at that time, was God. Like you've got to be good at it, otherwise what will you do? Especially for boys, because boys are
Right.
in maths. And
Right.
I was fighting. I was fighting the parents, fighting the colleagues, and although my students did very well, I award for best results with all my creative methods. But I felt that this is not the where it can be practiced. And so I moved to a very local school called Mirambika on the same campus. And Mirambika is the opposite. So they have no exams.
Right. Okay.
Basically move with your own pace. And that's where I kind of created and I invented a lot of ways of teaching.
Good. Yeah.
Because for me, the goal was very clear. Kid needs to move forward in maths and move forward with. So I would see what's the way is what's coming in the way that my lesson is not good enough. Let me improve it. What's coming in the way is the kid has a very low self-esteem because I'm, kids language, I suck at maths, then I need to work on self-esteem.
Yeah.
I need
Right.
to figure out why is it low. For example, a girl came to me and she would say, I'm so bad at maths, so bad at maths. And so I told her, look, you have maths, the center of your life. Your life to be in the center. Maths needs to be on the edge and contributing to it. So
Good. Yeah.
when they heard things like these from a maths, that it's okay if you're bad at maths, that
Right.
real difference. And there, so I found that times the stress of wanting to do good in maths dropped, and they actually did better. So that was for all of us a big success. So I
Yeah.
moved to education. I moved to a school called, I went to a school which is run on the ethos of J. Krishnamurti, South of
Okay.
India.
Yep.
And that is another, you can say, explosion for me, because that is completely based on relationships. So I learned how, through the sheer of relating to children, they will do anything. So, and after be open for me. So I worked in an IB school in Gurgaon and in north of India, in New Delhi. And that's where was my international explosion. So I'm in touch with the community of international education. And that was completely mind-blowing when I
Yeah.
went to Google to see exactly how creative maths can be, and the whole way of bringing multiple intelligences in. So, and school where I worked in, Pathways, gave a complete freedom to innovate, to explore, to figure out your answers. So they also have a very children. So while it was important that the results sync, but priority was that, kid needs to grow with a healthy sense of self-esteem. That made a lot of sense. That's why I started getting freelancing projects, and I was teaching and freelancing both side by side. And then things moved. I teacher training, and then I finally decided, okay, maybe let's quit teaching for few. I thought, let me just take a break from teaching. But it's been 7 years. I still miss it a little bit every day, but I haven't really felt like going back to it full time.
Yeah.
I think some will, either online teaching or offline. I will probably just go back and go back to the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I, as I said, I find that often well, I don't know for you. For me, when I'm teaching, when I'm training the teachers, there's often a lot of the subject material that it feels like you're still teaching the subject anyway. I don't know if that's the same for you. For me in particular, because I'm often teaching, well, especially when I'm teaching language teachers, I'm teaching English teachers, and I'm in an EFL or an ESL environment anyway. So maybe the English teacher is not, perfectly fluent in English anyway, even though they're an English teacher. So I'm training them in the teaching practice, the methodology, but often I'm also helping them understand the subject perhaps a little bit more deeply than they do. And I wonder to what extent that might be the same for you as well, because even with maths, you always kind of assume that when somebody chooses to teach a subject, it's because they are strong in that subject. But I know I've definitely seen, even with maths, where perhaps I thought that this was only true in the languages, but I've seen in maths and in other subjects as well, often where a student might ask the teacher a question and the teacher doesn't know the answer. And it's not a especially deep question. It seems to be a fairly shallow question. It just seems like the teacher hasn't really mastered that topic that they're teaching as much as perhaps you would like them to have. So what's in perhaps your experience being in India in particular, or just generally speaking, what have you found working with teachers? What's their level of maths mastery? Are they usually where you'd expect them to be, or are they still kind of perhaps below the performance in maths that you'd hope for?
Okay, that's a great question. So India, teachers are divided like into three categories: primary, middle, and senior, and CIRT, TGT, and PGT. So I find the teachers who teach grade 6 upwards, their maths concepts are very steady. They know it. They know
Right.
the math.
Sure.
They know the
Yeah. Okay.
rules. They know how to solve the problems probably better than me. It's
Right.
the how, why, what, where
Yep.
that seasoning, as I call it, is what's completely missing in
Mm.
most of the teachers. Although there is a very sizable number of teachers who are themselves in progressive schools, and they are very different. In primary, because anybody can be a primary teacher in most of the schools without being
Yeah,
a
I see.
subject. So there are a lot of primary teachers I have met in my training, actually themselves maths phobic.
Right.
And a lot of times after training, they say, my maths phobia has gone.
Okay,
So
that's good.
it's in primary that I have often encountered teachers who wouldn't know the concept or who wouldn't know the why behind the sometimes are making a mistake because it's not really their fault. They don't want to be there. And
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
several schools, in primary, especially in grade 1 and 2, one teacher handles all the subjects along with an assistant teacher. So they don't want to be in the maths class. They would rather someone else deals with it. They're very uncomfortable themselves. So there you could find teachers who have a conceptual issue also. But all in all, I have seen it in maybe just about 10% of the teachers.
Yeah.
But grade 6 upwards, they are very solid
Yeah.
into
Sure.
they
Okay.
can.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
as you go up, they get even better and better, and
Yeah.
they can solve pretty much any problem under the sun.
Yeah. Sure. No, that makes
That's
sense.
my
That makes sense.
experience. Yeah.
Another area that might be different between us, again, we talked a lot about some of the similarities and the crossovers between maths and language. Another area that I suspect will be different. As a language teacher, I've done quite a lot of teaching adults. So again, this is not
Yeah.
just, training teachers and the language issue comes up. This is,
Yeah.
students who are adult students learning English. I presume you've not done as much of that as a maths teacher, or do you
No,
teach
no.
maths to adults? Not really.
No, I haven't had to. I don't think there is, I think there is only one organization in India, the IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, and there are a couple of very experienced teachers who do refresher courses for teachers for
Yeah.
maths.
Okay. Right.
And,
Yeah.
but they are very few. I haven't done those. And those are again refresher courses where they go deeper into the research, what's the present research happening,
Right. Right. I see.
because like you rightly said, we assume that if you're teaching an examination class, then you must be knowing, your concepts must be themselves very, very clear. So
Yeah.
that issue hasn't come. I think, yeah, that's a very different from language teaching.
Yeah, I would have thought so. So I wonder though, for
Mhm.
the going back to just the idea of the love of maths, the enjoyment of maths that you're trying to build within
Hmm.
students.
Hmm.
You've taught, although not adults, for the children, you've taught at various levels, various ages.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you find that love of maths is something that has to be established early on, or it's too late, or do you have success bringing older children, maybe senior or high school children who don't like maths? Do you still have as much success bringing them to maths, even though, do you find there's a deadline for this, or can you do it at any age?
I can do it at any age, with my experience. But obviously, the earlier the better. The
Sure.
fear of maths internationally starts somewhere in grade 5 when
Right.
fractions step into the students' lives, especially
Sure. Yeah.
fractions with different denominators.
Yeah.
But I have been able to get kids to love maths at any age through these crazy ideas, through group learning. But most importantly, it's because of the attitude which I still hold very clear, that which is where my kids called my way of teaching humane maths, that
Right.
you, the person, are more important to me. So I'll give you one example, that I had a student who was a child prodigy where music and language are concerned. So even when she was in
Okay.
grade 6, which is 10-year-old, she was in the school choir, and she was also the editor of the school magazine.
Well.
She is a genius in these two
Sure.
subjects. But where maths is concerned, she wouldn't want to enter the maths class. She used to just stand at the door. She was
Wow.
traumatized. And since her mother was insistent, no, you cannot not do a subject. She used to spend something like 4 or 5 hours in the evening to just do maths. and music was, maybe she was teaching herself piano, violin. She sang, she wrote songs, and she was doing all that, let's say, in half an hour and 40 minutes. So
Right.
she came to me and she said, although I'm trying every day for 4 hours and 4 hours and 4 hours, I'm still flunking, and I feel I'm hitting against a wall, and I true. So I felt horrible. I said, here is a child prodigy. The music teacher is telling everybody that she's going to be some. And actually today, she's she's doing a graduation. She's doing gigs around New Delhi. She already
Oh,
has a
wow.
music group. She writes her
Wow.
own songs. She has followers. At
Great.
that time, she was in grade 6 or 7, and I thought this is criminal. Why is she doing 4 hours of math? So I told her, reverse it. Do 4 hours of your music and whatever
Yeah.
you want to do. And when you want to take a break, that's when you do, let's say, half an hour, 45 minutes of maths. And it was as if, her face was a bulb lit up inside her. She was so happy. And that's how slowly her barrier towards maths started dropping, little bit more, little bit more. She started feeling interested in the class. Then one day I told her that I've heard that a lot of math goes into making of music. So can you
Right.
maybe explain to us, how does it
Sure.
happen? And she was very short. She took a chair, stood on it. We didn't understand anything, whatever she said. She was talking about fractions,
Yeah.
simple fractions, complex fractions, harmonies, and we didn't
Right.
understand anything. But we were so focused because we were like, wow. We were like, how much she knows. We were like
Right.
wowed by her.
Yeah. Yeah. Just mesmerized
And
by her intelligence.
totally. And the turning point came, this is where the crazy whole brain projects work so well. Turning point came when I gave them project of design a maths magazine. And I said, you need to design a magazine, and I gave them a whole list of criteria. It should be price, it should be understood by grade 5, and pick any 4 maths concepts and develop a maths magazine complete with advertisements and everything. And that's where I came to know her skill in language, because she
I
submitted
see.
to me something which was done on Adobe, 13 14 pages, which
Wow.
I sent to the school principal, to the director, everybody under the sun in the school. And I said, please, wherever you meet this girl, pat her on the back for the brilliant work that she has done. The school marketing team put it on the school website because they said it's just such brilliant piece of work. And that
Wow.
girl was shocked that I am being praised in the maths class.
Yeah. Right. Wow.
So more than her, you can imagine the resistance to the maths class completely fell. So this is what I
Sure.
mean. A kid has to come to maths.
Yeah. Right. Bringing the
Then
kid to the
only
maths. I
maths.
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
So
like that.
these are the things because of which I don't think. I think I became a teacher in pathways in my IB school. My reputation became as a teacher who can get phobia maths out of any kid. So if any
Great.
parent came to the principal with kids and said, "My kid is so traumatized," blah blah blah, and the principal would say, "I have just the right classroom for you for your kids."
Great.
So I was able to do that. What surprises me is I think, except teachers who are themselves in progressive schools, how little acceptance is there for this. So if the
Right.
teachers say, um, 80% of my class is afraid of maths, and I would say, when you have taught something, why don't you do a 3-minute think, pair, share? Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
ask them to, let's do a journal entry on what have I understood? There's a sudden closure. No, we don't have
Yeah.
time for this.
Yeah.
I am actually, I cannot understand
Yeah.
why it is so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Well, I
you
wonder.
feel that? Do you
I
face
do
that?
very much so. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
two sides of that I agree completely with. The teachers, the individuals that I work with, and then also um, their position in the faculty. So when I'm
Yeah.
working with teachers, often they are, I'm bringing in completely new ideas that they've not really
Mm.
encountered before.
Mm.
And there's often a rejection of the new ideas. And you
Yeah.
said not
Yeah.
time. You're right. That's
Mm-hmm.
often the argument is we don't have time for that. And my
Mm.
kind of fundamental response to the time argument, because it's, I think, the most ubiquitous argument, and it's kind of
Yeah.
true. There's a truth to it, at least, that teachers don't
Yeah.
have a lot of time. the one thing that teachers all around the world can agree on, I think, is that there's just not enough time. But what I find, once you open yourself up to a lot of these strategies, they're saving time. They're you know, it feels like you're adding something new. So it's, okay, well, I already do this, and you're asking me to add something. And a lot of the time, the strategies are not about adding something; they're just different ways of doing something. And often they're saving time, they're time efficient. And so, but it's hard to present that, you know, until it's been demonstrated, until you can show them. I find that there's a lot of rejection, and time, you're right, time is the challenge, I think. And then the other side of that is, once you've got a teacher on board, they often then also feel a little bit alienated from the rest of their faculty, which is one of the reasons I now like working with a whole faculty. So now a lot of the time I'm working with the whole school. And although different teachers get on board, you know, more or less quickly, or if I'm working with the whole faculty, they can kind of all share an understanding of what we're trying to achieve together. But what I find when I do training where I'm working with one teacher, or you know, I've got a group of teachers from 5 different schools, each of those teachers goes back to their school, and then they come to me and they say, my school doesn't have time for, they won't let me try it, you know. And that's another challenge that I face.
You're right, because that's something which I faced in all the schools that I worked. The colleagues, you know, they can't stand that one person is moving ahead, being more creative, appreciated, kids are liking. So while the heads were very supportive, and the heads of department or the principals, but that kind of ostracizing does happen. So the kids love you, the parents love you, but your colleagues look at you as, you know, why is she working so hard to make something loving? And the second thing, you're very right, is in demonstration, because I have seen groups of teachers completely closed to an idea. Then I would say, okay, let me go into your class and show you how it's done. And at the end of it, they're like, more work was done. I would have taken 1 week to do what you did in one lesson, and the kids are happier. And and I would also take a short test at the end of it, you know, those 2 minutes test. But I have also seen schools where there are such amazing, in such small cities in India. That's what keeps me going in my work. It is unbelievable the kind of work teachers are doing in small cities. They have no resources. So there's a teacher in a very small city, and he said, the more I am, the faster my syllabus goes. And he discovered it himself. So he finishes the syllabus like 4 months to exam. He's all done, because the kids love his classes. And the kids often say, sir, you do your creative stuff. We will we will do the exercise ourselves at home. And I've seen in rural India teacher teaching in government school, and I heard about his classes, and I said, do you know that what you're doing is called multiple intelligences? And he didn't know, and all I did was just give him he said, and he said, I just see what each child is like, and based on what each child is like, I rustle up an activity and I give it to them. I said, you're completely doing, and this is some of the most beautiful strategies in the world. And he was very happy to hear that, but he was like, okay, that's okay, the kids like
just what I do.
It's my work. And he has some like 25 to 30 kids in a class. It's not less. And
right.
He used to be there for every session. That I used to work with an organization that works in rural sector. He used to be there for all the sessions, even if he had to take a leave from school, because he said, no, I get something. And then he's the one who came back and said, you know, I tried compare share with the kindergarten kids, and it worked very well. They were also talking to each other. So I think that's my muse.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, you know, it's great when there's an environment that supports it. Going back to what you said about the ostracization, I think there's two, at least as I've seen it, there's two sources for that. One is that I mean that it's two forms of threat. It's a sense of threat, I think. One is that this teacher becomes the favorite teacher, and all of the other teachers don't like that. They don't like that this person is the favorite teacher of the students. The other thing I think that worries and that causes the conflict is that, and something that I always try to make clear in my training as well when I'm working with teachers, is the goal of my training, the goal of the work that I do is to make the teaching more efficient, the teaching more effective. Essentially, the learning is easier, but it's not easier as a teacher. You've got to work harder to do this. I'm not pretending that I'm giving you less work. It is harder. You have to, you know, surprise, surprise. If you want to do a better job, you have to work a little bit harder. And so when you've got teachers who are willing to go the extra mile and work harder, sometimes I think the other teachers look and say, we're going to get in trouble. You're making us look bad because you're doing all of this hard work that we can't.
Or we may be expected to do the same.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that,
I think that might be what it is. Yeah. I think you're right.
That I have faced a lot. So slowly the teachers start looking at you like, it's like Jonathan Siegel, that story. So why is she different? So they would be more teach. I think in every department in school, there is at least one person who tends to get ostracized because that person is going the extra mile to do something different. That's what I've seen with many teachers in the schools that I've worked.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was going to say something then. I can't remember. It'll come back to me. I wonder though as well.
That with anyone. Yeah.
That's good. I wonder as well. You talked about the importance of the community and the school. We talked about the schools that you work in, the community. You also do instructional design, so you're writing programs and you're writing materials. I wonder what role you think the curriculum plays in this, you know, this problem of kind of maths phobia. Obviously, the way that the teacher is teaching is a very important part of this. But what about the curriculum? Do you feel that the curriculum flows to some of this?
That's a great question. I think it plays a huge role. That if the teachers had something ready, probably there would be less risk. Because if teachers had a ready reckoner and a certain freedom, we've got two things happening in the education management industry with schools. That there are some organizations who are doing curriculum design for the teachers, but it has become very prescriptive.
Right. Yeah.
Either the organization who sells it to the school says, okay, we are going to come and see how your teachers are doing it, and they've got to do what we are telling them because our curriculum is based on this education is. And obviously, it's not going to work fully because teaching is a very present moment exercise.
Right.
The other organizations are organizations where they say that, okay, here is a ready curriculum for your teachers to use, but this is our suggestion. And if the teacher wants to tweak it this way or that way, that's okay with us. So I think it's just, if the second kind of curriculum works well, and that was the community support that we got in the IB school that we were working in, where the HOD used to say that I want your lesson plan, but I don't care if you change it fully in your next lesson plan. I just tell me, did you change anything or not, and why did you do that? That's all. So the IB made me more and more reflective, because the heads would say every good teacher would tweak the lesson plan a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
That level of freedom. So along with curriculum, that certain autonomy to the teacher. I think that's what works. That's what works best. So if you give, let's say the IB school gave us laptops and Wi-Fi, and that was enough, because there are so many open source material available.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I think. And I think the teachers are discovering it now, because that whole buzz that we were hoping the teachers would get, they are feeling it now, because classes are completely flipped. They have to teach online. They need interesting material to hold the kids. And in the WhatsApp groups that I am in with educators, I feel that buzz now. You know, I discovered this great website and I'm going to use it. How do I do assessment? So now they're asking the questions because probably they have that space. You know, nobody's breathing down their neck.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And IB has showed that if teachers are given sufficient autonomy, they can come build their own curriculum. Or if they are given a ready curriculum, they can tweak it and do a brilliant job. So it's just that space is, I think, what teachers need. That just space, some trust, some respect. And
I agree completely.
They can do wonders.
You said you talked about teaching being an in-the-moment activity, and I think that's a nice phrase. It reminds me of something that I kind of protested against here in Indonesia quite a while ago. I don't think I was successful. I think it's still the same. But here, teachers are expected to write their entire book of lesson plans 1 year in advance. So they have to have, at the beginning of the year, they have to have all of their lesson plans in a folder submitted to the principal.
Oh
And
God, that
apart
never
from,
works.
right, I mean, apart from the fact that it's a just an incredible mountain of work that the teacher has to do,
Yeah.
it's just such an overload. I also think that, for me, when I plan my lessons the day that I'm teaching or the night before, they're always better. If I have to plan far in advance, I find that my own mindset changes from one day to the next. So that if I plan a lesson today, but I don't teach it until next week, I might not be in the same kind of mental space that I was when I wrote the plan.
Absolutely.
And if a teacher has to write their plan 6 months, 12 months in advance, they don't know where they're going to be. They don't know where their students are going to be. I think you have to be planning, as you said, in the moment. I think that's an
in the
important part of
moment.
it.
Yeah. Or like we would do weekly plans, but to know that I have the freedom to tweak it.
Yes, that's
so for
important.
example, I went into class once thinking this is a great lesson plan, and I was on sky, seventh heaven, that this is a great lesson plan and my kids are going to love it. It was a disaster for various reasons. And 5 minutes into the lesson, I was very mad. I worked so hard and they are just not understanding what I want. But 5 minutes into the lesson, I understood this is not working. So I had given the whole class task sheets, and these were these 11 years olds looking at me with such innocence and saying, "Ma'am, we just don't get it." And so I had to stop it. I had to say, okay, just throw these task sheets and let's go back to the board and textbook and let me teach you. And everything was peaceful. And in 20 minutes, I was able to finish 40 minutes task. And my HOD, she loved it. She said, I loved it that you had the present moment sense or the common sense to just drop what was not working. So I think what I always feel is, while so much attention is going to children, so little is going to us. I think a school needs to be seen as a learning community. If we are differentiating learning for kids, we need to differentiate teacher education.
I agree.
You cannot say every class will have a smart class and every teacher will do. I mean, there may be teachers who do not want to do it, let's say now. Maybe they need 6 months to do. Like, first time when I was shown a smart board, I was frozen. I was like, what is this? And they gave me a pen. They said, write on it. I was absolutely frozen. I said, but I don't need it. I have a laptop and Wi-Fi and a projector. I don't need a smart class with ready content into it. I can give you 100 websites with great material. For me, it was important that fluidity of content was important. And a smart class with its ready content was like, I can't do it. So to have teachers also, that I think teacher education needs to bring in differentiation in the training program for the teachers.
I agree.
To which is which is needed. I think too much is expected. Like you said so beautifully, the teachers are learning how to teach as they are teaching, and the product that we are expecting is a student who cultivates the sense of lifelong learning, not anything else. So that requires a lot of compassion towards the teachers.
No, you're right. And there's an important shift in perspective that I think you've highlighted there as well. When you talked about, adapting in the middle of the lesson, realize that something isn't working and adapting, and whether we're doing that as teachers with students or trainers with teachers. I think that there's a kind of a misconception. The standard perspective is that a successful lesson is when you complete the lesson plan, and a failed lesson is when the lesson plan, whereas obviously you would agree with me. I think that a successful lesson is when the students understand, and if you have to drop the lesson plan and do something else, completing a lesson plan but having confused students is not a successful lesson, right?
And you're very right that this is how it should be in teacher training, because initially I was quite rigid about my training, because here I was a teacher from IB school with all my hi-fi ideas, and I thought I will revolutionize education in India. But all those, I mean, I had to cut the chips on my shoulders bit by bit. So one thing, when I saw how amazing some of the Indian teachers were, and that kind of made me very humble. And the second thing I realized that jargon is, I'm just completely putting the teachers off. So I had to
Yeah, that's so
simplify my
true.
language.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the final thing I had to learn was what you said, that to make my sessions only adaptable. So let's
Hmm.
say one group I was in eastern part of India, and I went with 6 or 7 best practices pack with them. And just when I was doing collaborative learning, everything stopped because they had so many questions. How will we do it
Right.
if this
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah.
So they completely took over the session with their questions, and I went with it.
Yeah.
For the
That's good.
next
Yeah.
2 hours, I was answering their question. How do we do it
Yeah.
in kindergarten? What if? And I had all the answers because I had
Yeah.
faced those situations.
Right. Yeah.
And at
Good.
the end of it, the group of teachers, the head of the department told me, you know, you have solved the biggest problem we had in the maths department. And I thought, okay, well, then that's a successful workshop because they got
Yeah.
something that I couldn't
Yeah.
do the other 6 best
Yeah.
practices.
No,
So
that's it.
this is
Yeah.
something I also learned
That's
while
great.
training teachers, that I need to be adaptable.
Yeah. That's really good.
Let's say another session, the teachers were very edgy. They weren't focusing, they weren't answering any questions. And so I stopped the training and I said, I am not a speaker. I am not here to
Yeah.
teach you. This is supposed to
Yeah.
be an interactive session. So what is going wrong? Is it my workshop? Because that's always the first thought, you know, is it my content? Is it not good enough?
Right.
And then one of them, who was quite a good speaker, and she said, no, we are just too stressed out. So I said, okay, here you have 45 minutes. Let's discuss. Stress is the teacher's face. And what do we do with it? I put them into groups, share with each other, because one person's stress could be another person's
Yeah.
strength, learn from
Yeah.
each other.
Good.
And there was such a difference in the energy in the room.
Yeah.
And after 40 minutes, they said, fine, we are fine. And they were all happy, had a glass of water, drink something, go for a walk, came back, and the session went. So this is something I learned over the years as I
Yeah. That's
trained,
good.
that I need to be as adaptable with teachers as I
Yeah.
was
That's
with
good.
children. And sometimes even more, because teachers are sometimes much more vulnerable than
Right. Yeah. And
children.
very complex adults. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
There's a couple of things I want to respond to there.
Yeah.
That last point first, let's go with that. This, when you had that, the teachers who were stressed and you kind of just
Mm-hmm.
took some time to deal with that stress, makes me think of as well the way that I have relatively recently in the last couple of years of my training, tried to make a very kind of conscious effort to reposition myself as a trainer, where often as a trainer, you know, you're hired by the school or you're paid by the school, you're invited by the school, the administration, the head, and you kind of, or at least I always kind of felt like I was working with the head, you know, so we were kind of at the top and I was working with or for the head to instruct the teachers. And
Yeah.
over time and in recent years, I've repositioned myself. Yeah, I'm hired by the head and I'm paid by the head or by the administration, but I'm here for the teachers. My
Mm-hmm.
responsibility is to the teachers. And this makes me
Mm-hmm.
think the way you talk about humane maths and kind of, you know, the
Yeah.
humanity of it. I think that that's something I try now to incorporate into my training as well. I'm here for the teachers. I'm here to support the teachers and help the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
rather than being here as a, you know, I don't know, as an expert or as a
Mm-hmm.
whatever role it was I used to be taking. Kind of brought some conflict where now I see myself much more as being on the same level as the teachers, and
Yeah.
you know, I'm here for you as the teachers. I'm here to support you.
Mm-hmm.
As that sounds perhaps like something you'd be in agreement with.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm quite sure you are much more satisfied and probably being able to make more of a difference with this
Yeah,
with
that's
this
what I've noticed.
approach.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah. And then the other
Yeah.
thing as well. What was the other thing? Yeah, when you talked about jargon, I think that was really important.
Mm-hmm.
So something that it took me a while to really work out what was going on when I started
Mm-hmm.
training here in Indonesia. You know, the teachers here are all very highly qualified. They have
Okay.
multiple degrees, because it's a very, very, I mean, you've already mentioned with the books that you're writing, I think you've already become aware of this. It's a very, very formal education system. It's very heavily
It's
based
much
on
much
formality. Right.
tougher than India. Yeah.
Right, tougher than I think most places on that formality. But what I found was that, you know, these teachers are often very well qualified,
Okay.
but the practical side isn't there. And one thing
Yeah.
that really manifested in is one thing that the teachers have to do. They have to take they call it a teacher competency test. That's the translation.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, this is great. You know, they have this teacher competency test. So every teacher takes this test and they get their certificate to say that they passed the teacher competency test. And it turned out that that was really just a test of theory. It was like an exam. And it was really heavily based in just the jargon of teaching, you know, defining the terms. What does this term mean? What is this theory? But there was actually no practical element to it. So it said nothing about their competency. It was purely based on the jargon. And so I would have teachers who knew all of the terminology, all of the theory. They could name the person who wrote the book. They knew all of the theorists and the history of every bit of teaching pedagogy. But the questions were, you know, but how do I do that in the classroom? And the jargon was just, it didn't give them anything. They had all the jargon and it didn't help them in any way. And stepping away from the jargon and moving towards the practice was an eye-opener for so many of the teachers, where they'd spent years and years and years studying teaching, but they didn't actually know how to teach.
That's sad. Yeah.
Another question I had for you as well, talking about the curriculum. I really liked what you said about or differentiating between a prescriptive curriculum that just says, you know, here's the content and here is what you must teach, and then the difference when you give teachers the autonomy to kind of adapt. So you've given them the guideline. The curriculum is a guideline, but the teachers have the autonomy to adapt. So I wonder how you're building that in. You mentioned at the beginning of the call that you're working on this series for teachers here in Indonesia, and you're now at the stage of writing the manual for that. So how are you incorporating that idea into the manuals, the teacher guides that you're writing? How do you think about that autonomy?
Yeah. So this is actually inbuilt in the design that they have given to me. So this is a very unusual, a very innovative design. So normally I don't do content writing anymore. I do more of review work or trainings or COVID finished one on-site project for me where I used to go to schools and actually sit in the classroom and work with. So this is the design that the publisher has given to me. They themselves didn't want those very customary, ancient type of lesson plans where, you know, you basically tell the teacher what to do. Because they discovered, as I think publishers really have the pulse of the schools, and they discovered that that doesn't work, that teachers don't really go by it. And they have given me the design where I need to just give my ideas on, okay, how would I teach or how should this be taught? And they have just given me some elements that I must include. But
that's very nice.
So they have given me a lot of freedom to design it. So let's say they've given me a set of 15 elements, and they've said, look, 3 should come in every chapter and all 15 should be there in the book. So their design is very logical. They don't want things to be there. You know, for example, some designs are, there should be, let's say, something for the special needs students in every chapter, or there should be a misconception in every chapter. So they haven't created a rigid design like that. They're saying wherever anything comes very naturally, let it be. Plus they are very open to my ideas. So as I told them that sometimes maybe in a teacher's manual, we should give teachers a choice that you could do it this way. If you can go outside, if you can't go outside, you can do it this way. You can do this task using paper clips, but if that's hard to find, here is your. So I'm giving constantly choices with complexity and simplicity, and they're very open to that. So it's I think it's a publisher who knows.
That's great. I mean, I can say without any doubt at all, that's exactly what the teachers need here. Something that, you know, you're giving them. Yeah, that's it. It's feasible, it's plausible. You're giving them the flexibility, but also the guideline, because what I found is, again, in my experience, it was important for me to find the balance between allowing creativity, but also scaffolding towards that creativity. Because again, teachers are coming from a background where they don't really, they don't know what's available to them. And so it's not enough to say, you're free to do what you want, because they go, well, I don't know what to do.
Then
and
you
so
don't know
finding the pathway in the middle, I think, and it sounds like that, what you're putting together is finding that balance very well.
Yeah. And here I will add here that even the prescriptive lessons are very helpful to a certain kind of teachers. So like
Sure. Okay.
somebody who worked in a company where the lesson plans are very, very prescriptive, he said it helps to bring teachers from negative to at least 0 or 1. So those
Yeah,
teachers
that's
who
right.
have
That's true.
never done anything except chalk, board, book, and here is a formula and do the problems, they at least come. But at some point, whenever the teachers start feeling the discontent, the school heads need to be open enough to recognize, okay, now my teachers are moving from
They're ready for the next. Yeah, that's
prescription,
so good. Yeah,
absolutely ready for the next. And some school
that's
heads
so
I
good.
know who do that. So they a friend of mine who took over a school, so initially she brought in the prescriptive environment and
Hmm.
she used that to build up her teachers. But in 3-4 years, when she saw the teachers were responding very well, and they were feeling very edgy and
Yeah.
suffocated in the prescriptive environment, she discontinued the curriculum that she had bought, and she took over. And then she found that she was able to do a balance. And teachers are so different. You know? If she has, let's say, 6 maths teachers that I work with, they were at 6 different levels.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure. Yeah,
she's good at differentiating. And so the
that's good.
prescription also helps. It helps to a certain extent. And
Yeah.
after that,
No,
the
that makes
teachers
sense.
need some space. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's good. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Ah, there was something I wanted to ask then.
Okay.
No, I can't remember. But I'm very, very excited about the way you've described those books. That sounds, as I said, that sounds like it's really finding the balance that's
Yeah.
needed.
I'm enjoying it a
Um,
lot. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And I think that that's an approach that would be valuable again in other subjects as well. What I've found more and more over the training that I've done, as I said, I started training language teachers, and
Yeah.
what I found over time was that it seemed to be a standard opinion that the way you teach one subject is specific to that subject. So this is the way that you teach English or languages, and then that's special for language. And what I've basically been doing over the years with my training is taking these principles that work for language education and seeing, trying to bring them into the other subjects. And it's, again, the way that you've just described your approach to the maths curriculum there is something that we should be seeing in all subjects, I think, across the board.
We should. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun too, because that's when you actually understand that there's no subject that is standing on its own. No, they're all connected, interconnected.
Absolutely.
So it's a lot of fun too. That's a part of teaching that I miss. This whole working with other teachers to kind of bring everything together. I don't think a curriculum has as yet been developed which kind of brings this element.
No, I agree.
Mhm.
No, it's something I'd like to see more of. Brilliant. Okay. Do you think there's anything we've missed, Monica?
Do you remember the question that you had asked, or have you forgotten?
No, it's gone. It's gone. I don't know.
It's gone. Maybe you can put it on LinkedIn
Yeah,
when you get it.
Yeah.
No, I think this is pretty much okay. This was quite good. I learned a lot
good.
about how Indonesian teachers work. I should be able to use it in my project and understand, okay, these are the minds that I'm writing for. And it's good to know that they are trained, they are educated.
Yeah. And I'll be very happy to keep talking with you about that outside of this if you want.
Yeah,
You reminded me what
my
my question was. So you are making your videos as well, your regular.
Yeah.
Do you make them every week? I've seen quite a few. Do you make them weekly?
No, so any day when I feel like, I make loads and loads of videos.
Okay.
And then I take my time in editing them, and I schedule them all on YouTube.
I see.
Videos are done till January 2021. They are kind of done. So I won't be able. Yeah, I'm not able to do it daily. So the day that creativity strikes and a topic strikes me, this is a topic I can take into small pieces. That's when I do. So I do it in bulk and I schedule it. So it's all done.
Okay. So I wonder what you found. Obviously, I don't know when you started making those videos, but when I look at them now, I see that you're getting engagement from, I'm here in Indonesia, and I see you're getting engagement from all around the world. What have you has that changed any of your perspective in any way to be now part of this more international community where you're getting feedback and comments and questions from around the world?
Totally,
That affected you in any way?
totally, absolutely. When I put up my first video, I have my bunch of ex-students who are like my buddies, and I reach out to them whenever I have some query, and I sent it to 6, 7 of them, and I said, "How is it? How is it? Please tell me." And when I put it up on LinkedIn, I didn't go back to LinkedIn for a whole day. I was like, "Oh my God, I
Yeah,
hope there was one like to it." And
yeah,
then I
yeah,
went
yeah.
back, and it was like 35, 40. So
Wow, yeah.
I think uh, it's really great. I think this is something I actually would like to do for the rest of my life, which is to put out one video, and maybe in future I'm thinking of doing free YouTube lives where I just share
Oh, yeah,
everything
wow.
that I know with people,
Yeah,
and
wow.
it'll save me the bother of making a video and putting it up on YouTube. And a live has
Yeah.
its own appeal. So no, this has been pretty incredible. I mean, I didn't expect people writing messages to me that we got ideas, we got tips, and teachers saying, and most importantly, even if a single teacher writes that, "Hey, idea to do this in my classroom, it seems worth it."
Yeah, right, absolutely.
I think I do have a long way to go in the videos, but I'm sure I'm going to keep doing it and keep them maximum 3 minutes, individual
Yeah,
videos.
right, right.
So that's been quite a pleasant surprise for me that it's
That's great.
kind of working. So far, so good.
Great. What I'll put a link to that, to your YouTube channel in the, along with this video. Is there anything
Oh,
else?
that would be great.
Yeah, of course I will. Is there anything else, anywhere else people should come and find you, or anything else you want to include links to or references to?
It's my blog. I think mainly it's a blog and the YouTube channel. So
Okay.
blog is where loads and loads of lesson plan ideas are there,
Oh,
and
great.
loads of articles are there. Earlier,
Great.
I used to put them on LinkedIn, but now I'm focusing on putting them on the blog, and I put one link every Saturday on LinkedIn. So it's
Oh,
like
that's good. Yeah.
Saturday is a blog, Sunday is the YouTube
I
video
see.
post.
Nice. Good.
And yeah, these are the two things I'm going to focus on, and probably for as long as I can.
Good.
Thank
Well,
you. Thank
hopefully
you so
anybody
much
who's watched this will come and have a look at those. And
yeah.
great. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Monica. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
same here. It's always a pleasure talking to language teachers, because you have such perfect expressions. So things we would
We
probably
try.
take
I
4
think we
sentences
try.
to say, you would probably say it in one brief, succinct sentence. So it's always a pleasure.
Great. Thanks a lot,
Thank
Monica.
you,
Thank you.
and have a good rest of the weekend.
Yeah, you too.